My name is Subhashri Devasenapati, and I've been working in genotypic technology for the past 1 year, where I'm heading the NGS lab. Well, I welcome you all to my webinar. And I'll be talking about RNA sequencing and the implications. Just a second. I'll be talking about RNA sequencing and the tools implications in virology research and vaccine development. Now, this webinar's topic is in context with the current crisis that the world is facing, but I would also like to take this opportunity to discuss and describe genotypic technologies endeavors for the past so many years, specifically in the field of RNA sequencing, and our contributions to the SARS-CoV-2 research. So, as Dr. Prashant has already described, that we've been at the forefront of genomics for the past so many years, and we have many firsts and to our credit, and so we have collaborated closely with technology companies like Agilent, Illumina Life Technologies, and QIAGEN, and we have all our processes ISO certified and in compliance with ISO standards. We have more than 500 clients and more than 500 publications that have cited our services. In the field of RNA sequencing, we have more than 500 projects that have been carried out till date. So what does RNA sequencing do? RNA sequencing is a revolutionary tool in the field of genomics and functional genomics. So RNA sequencing, or RNA-seq in short, facilitates quantification of transcript abundance, that is gene expression, and simultaneously decoding the sequence. It's the most common NGS method and is by far the most cited method with more than 9,000 PubMed references. So studying RNA transcription enables us to understand a variety of biological processes like differential gene expression, post-translational modifications, RNA splicing, RNA binding protein biology, RNA expression at various stages in an organism's life cycle, unique RNA isoform studies, RNA degradation, and regulation of other RNA species of the non-coding genome. So we were talking about how RNA sequencing empowers the researcher by making them understand implications of RNA production and processing, regulation for altering cellular phenotype, etc. So, which means that RNA sequencing is a very important revolutionary tool in functional genomics that has allowed us to review diagnostics and disease, allowed us to profile diseases, allowed us to discover biomarkers, responses to environmental stressors, understand pharmacogenomics and drug mechanism of actions or mode of action of treatment regimens. So RNA sequencing as a tool has allowed us to study human pathogen transcriptomes and the dynamics of the interaction between the transcriptomes. RNA sequencing as a tool has allowed us to understand gene functions and annotate them, annotate new genomes, novel genomes for non-model organisms, identify bioactive compounds, characterize species by using de novo transcriptome analysis tool, which I'll be talking about in great detail now, allowed us to understand ecological, evolutionary, environmental biology questions. So there are three different types of RNA sequencing platforms: short read cDNA sequencing, long read cDNA sequencing, and long read direct RNA sequencing. So short read cDNA sequencing is the de facto method, is the most common method and the most conventional method by far, and is carried out on using the Illumina technology, whereby fragmented mRNA, fragmented to a size range of 150 to 200 base pair sizes, fragments, are sequenced to generate data in the order of 20 to 30 million paired in reads, which allows us to, this kind of data allows us to quantify gene expression across the transcriptome. long read cDNA sequencing is an alternative to short read cDNA sequencing, which is being adopted quite frequently now, which is amenable on PacBio nanopore sequencing technologies. It is an alternative method with several advantages. It allows us to sequence full-length transcripts ranging from 1 to 50 kb in sizes. But the depth of sequencing is low throughput, 0.5 to 1 million reads. But it also allows us to study transcriptomes which are novel, which don't have references to compare them to or align them against. They allow us to discover new isoforms or splice variants and discover RNA modifications. There's an improvised long read sequencing technology, which is called direct RNA sequencing technology. So long read cDNA sequencing technology and short read cDNA sequencing basically works on converting mRNA to cDNA, but long read direct RNA sequencing offers some advantages where we do not have to convert them to cDNA. We do not have to ship the strand or switch the template that we want to primarily look at. So it's also amenable on nanopore sequencers, and where we can sequence up to 50 kb long transcripts. So as I said, there's no reverse transcription that is a necessary intermediate step. There's no template switching that happens, and there are no PCR-induced artifacts or biases. So, it offers several advantages, and it also allows us to, study de novo transcriptomes and discover isoforms, new isoforms, RNA modifications, and also study alternative polyadenylation. So, I'm working with short read cDNA sequencing technology. So I'll be primarily focusing for the next few slides on this area. So short read cDNA sequencing sort of gives us a liberty or flexibility to construct different kinds of RNA-seq libraries. So these different types of libraries also allow you to, enrich your study or your study to what happens. They also allow you to, so these different kinds of techniques of RNA-seq construction, RNA-seq library constructions also allow you to sort of empower your study or enrich your study to answer different biological questions in different ways. So the most commonly used method for library construction is the mRNA enrichment method, whereby you enrich the polyadenylated fraction of your total RNA, of your total transcriptome, by using magnetic beads which are coated with oligodeoxy T oligomers. So, these are, so the mRNA fraction or the polyadenylated fraction of your RNA is pulled down using these beads, and they are subsequently sequenced. So with this data, the data that comes out of this sequencing exercise allows you to look at the protein coding regions of the transcriptome. So this has certain disadvantages. One of which is what we call as 3' bias, which is introduced when you are using degraded RNA. So RNA degradation primarily happens starting from the 3' A-rich regions. So when you lose those regions, you're not able to capture them in your library. So you'll have a decreased coverage or a compromised coverage of your transcripts, because of which you will have a biased data. So your RNA integrity, the integrity of the starting material needs to be good, superior. And another disadvantage of this method is that we're not looking at the non-coding or non-polyadenylated, non-adenylated fraction of the transcriptome. So the non-coding regulatory regions of the transcriptome, regulatory part of the transcriptome is not amenable to study using this method. So why can't we study the whole, the total RNA? Why can't we sequence the total RNA? We can't do that because total RNA has abundant ribosomal RNA, which will increase the noise and subdue the sequencing, subdue the sequence data, derived from your messenger RNA or the RNA of your primary interest. So to counter all these, to overcome all this, we have an alternate method for library preparation, which we call as ribosomal RNA depletion, whereby what we do is we pull out the rRNA fraction of the total RNA by using species-specific rRNA probes, which allow rRNA hybridization to the magnetic beads and pull them out and sort of make them unavailable for further processes or readouts. So using this method, we can deplete majority of rRNA, all kinds of species of rRNAs. We can also we also have kits available for depleting globin RNA, which is an abundant part of whole blood derived RNA. So this is obviously compatible with degraded RNA because you're not looking at degraded portions of the RNA fragments. So the depth of sequencing needs to be higher when you're using this method because there will be some remnant rRNA or uninteresting RNA that could come into that could sort of seep into your library, final libraries. So the depth of sequencing needs to be a little higher so that your primary interest of RNA is not subdued. So whatever RNA method, whatever RNA library prep method or whatever kind of study you're doing or whatever your primary interest is, you would also be interested in looking at a particular genome for which a reference is available, wherein you can sort of easily or very conveniently have two samples or a pair of samples or multiple pairs of samples which you could compare. So the sequence data out of which when you get, you can sort of align them against the available consensus sequence available on various databases, and which allows you to sort of derive your transcript information from your data and compare the transcript abundance or quantify the transcript abundance concentration between your samples. But when your reference genome is not available, or you're looking at a non-model organism, or you're looking at a genome which has been considerably altered because of a disease phenotype such as cancer, or your primary interest is to look at rare transcripts or isoforms for which a reference will not be available, and your whatever reference you have at hand is not going to sort of identify the sequence that you derived from the sequencer, you would do what is called as de novo RNA sequencing, which will allow you to identify novel transcripts, novel and highly altered transcript isoforms, detect rare transcripts, and annotate novel genomes or non-model organism genomes. So for having an RNA-seq data, which will allow you to meaningfully derive relevant information to your study, you need to look at important parameters, and you want to consider them before you really sequence your samples. So first and foremost is you should look at designing your study such that you have enough biological and technical replicates. The general norm for which is 3 or 4 replicates, but there was a paper in 2016 which suggested the use of at least 6 replicates. And the depth of sequencing is another question that you want to answer upfront before you design, when you're just designing a study. So you would want to generate anywhere between 10 to 30 million paired end reads, which is the generally accepted coverage sufficient for looking at eukaryotic and prokaryotic transcriptomes. But if your biological replicates are enough in number, and the aim is to probably only look at differential expression across highly expressed transcripts, a low pass sequencing, that is 10 to 15 million paired end reads, will also provide sufficient coverage. So you want to sort of determine the depth of sequencing upfront. Then you also would like to discuss and brainstorm over what kind of read lengths would you want to sequence, and whether you want to have single end reads generated or paired end reads generated. So for quantitative RNA sequencing assays, we want to sequence anywhere between 50 to 100 base pairs. And for assays, for studies where you want to look at isoform identification and differentiate between different differential isoforms, then you would, which we call as qualitative RNA-seq assays, you would want to look at longer reads up to 150 base pairs at least. So single-end sequencing again is enough to identify the read and map it to the source gene upon your alignment with the reference. So single-end sequencing will be enough to identify the basic source gene where the read is coming from. But paired end reads are definitely required for unambiguous read mappability, and they are definitely necessary for qualitative assays. So our experts will take efforts to discuss and guide on how to go about designing your study, your RNA sequencing study, in the best possible, most informative and cost-effective way, according to the affordability of the user. So we've carried out more than 500 transcript to RNA sequencing studies so far, but some of them have been our very own brain waves, and two of most cited publications are on your screen, displayed on your screen. So one was on the novel transcripts that are associated with anti-cancer, anti-malarial actions of turmeric. The other one was published in BMC Genomics in the year 2012, which talked about the anti-diabetic properties of Costus pictus, which is also called the insulin plant. So I'd be telling you a little story about the Costus pictus study. So it so happened that a former colleague of my boss, Dr. Sudhas, he was discussing with her in the corridor once that he had stopped taking insulin medicines for the past 15 days, and he has never felt healthier. So, so Dr. Sudha was obviously very intrigued, and she asked, what did he do? So he said he'd been eating leaves from a plant called the insulin plant, and which have been shown to have anti-diabetic effects, various studies, and he was very happy about it. So the scientists and Dr. Sudha obviously jumped, and they all sat together, brainstormed, and decided to sequence the leaf of the insulin plant. So that's how they started with the study. So they conducted a de novo transcriptome analysis of Costus pictus leaves to decode and understand its anti-diabetic potential. The study was conceived, designed, executed, and analyzed at Genome Technology, and was published in the year 2012 in BMC Genomics. So insulin plant is also known as, commonly known as spiral ginger. Scientific name is Costus pictus. It's a non-model plant for which reference wasn't available at the time of the study. So Benny M in 2008 had filed a patent describing that the oral supplementation of the leaf extract of Costus pictus happens to bring down glucose levels in diabetic patients. And thereafter, various hypotheses on the possible mechanisms had been proposed, varying from suppression of carbohydrate hydrolases, pancreatic stimulation through activation of calcium ion beta channels, beta amyloid mediation, etc. But the exact mechanism was still elusive. So the leaves have also been reported to show antioxidant, anti-cancer, antibacterial, diuretic effects. So it was quite intriguing to, to not consider, not to study this further. So we carried out RNA sequencing of Costus pictus in order to identify and characterize transcripts that could be potentially associated with the observed medicinal properties or reported medicinal properties. We took high quality leaf RNA that had a RNA integrity number of 8.2. Library was constructed of this RNA using the mRNA library was constructed of this RNA using Illumina TruSeq RNA prep kit following manufacturer's instructions. Paired end sequencing was carried out on Illumina GA2X to generate 73 base pair end reads. And 41 million paired end reads were generated, which were used to assemble the Costus pictus transcriptome. A total of 55,000 plus high quality transcripts were assembled. High quality cutoff was length more than 200 bases. And the assembly had a very high quality with an N50 score of 1353 bases. So they went on to conduct a gene ontology analysis to identify what functions are associated with the transcripts identified. And they saw that there were many transcripts enriched in biological process under the biological process terms pertaining to functions of DNA-dependent transcription, regulation of transcription, protein, serine, threonine kinase activity, and defense responses. There were also some molecular functions where transcript abundance was seen in the function pertaining to ATP binding. Cellular processes integral to membrane, nucleus, and plasma membrane were also seen as enriched. Went on to do protein functional annotation of recovered transcripts, whereby we discovered that there were a lot of transcripts enriched in the regions, indicating functions responsible for signal transduction, protein turnover, intracellular trafficking, transcription, translation, ribosome biogenesis, transport and metabolism, carbohydrate, lipid, and amino acids. But our primary interest was in the secondary metabolite biosynthesis, transport, and catabolism. And we saw transcript representation, a decent transcript representation of in the order of 3.2% in this category. So we went on to study the terpenoid pathway, which is a very important secondary metabolite pathway. Since terpenoids are known to have antibacterial, anti-cancer, anti-diabetic properties, which was in line with what properties have been discovered and annotated for Costus pictus. And we saw that a major portion of transcripts clustered around the Bixin biosynthesis. If you see at the top left of the Venn diagram, the blue triangle, so the biggest triangle in the chart, corresponds to Bixin biosynthesis pathway. And if you see the next big chunk of the graph, you could see that it corresponds to geraniol and geraniol biosynthesis pathway. So these were the two most predominant pathways that we saw transcript enrichment in. So this sort of led us to further study these two pathways. And we know that the terpenoid pathway has anti-diabetic properties. And we went on to see what kind of transcripts are showing what kind of expression levels in this data set. We saw that there was enrichment of, there was an upregulation of significant upregulation of the precursor for the secondary metabolite Bixin, which we saw in the previous graph in the data. So we had to validate this. First, we validated using conventional PCR methods. We saw that there was increased expression. There was indeed increased expression of some of these genes, out of which putative Nord-Bixin methyltransferase, which is a precursor for the secondary metabolite Bixin, was also showing significant upregulation. So we had to confirm this at the biochemical level. So we conducted HPLC assays, with the results of which confirmed the presence of high amounts of Dixin in the leaf extracts, and several other secondary, findings were also there in the studies that which indicated presence of or upregulation of transcripts that are associated with phytochemical compounds that have anti-cancer, antioxidant, immunomodulatory, antimicrobial, and anti-malarial properties. So, so this was a short story that that we sort of celebrate now and then with. We also do nanopore long-read sequencing for transcriptome analysis. Nanopore long-read sequencing, as I already told in the previous slide, gives us major advantages over short-read cDNA sequencing methods, in that it is able to cover the entire full length of the transcripts, and we're not looking at fragmented RNA there, whereby we will lose sort of information or positional information because of lack of coverage in that particular region. So long nanopore reads obviously span, because they span full length transcripts, they simplify our abilities to identify them accurately, and where we encounter problems with isoform identification because of homology between sequences, between different isoforms, considerable homology between them. We're able to identify them accurately and differentiate them, distinguish them from one another using long-read transcriptome sequencing on nanopore. So, so Genotypic technology has undertaken a lot of RNA sequencing studies, where many of them have been with atypical samples, or samples which were of different qualities and different kinds from different sources. And so there were a whole array of uncommon RNA-seq studies that we sort of documented and treasured, and we sort of boast about them. So, so we have looked at, we have sequenced FFP RNA, formalin fixed paraffin embedded RNA, which is typically very highly fragmented and of very inferior quality. We've been able to do degradome sequencing, that is, look at degraded RNA that has been sort of the target of regulatory microRNAs. We've looked at cell-free RNA from oncological sources. We've looked at combinatorial approaches to assay mRNA and miRNA simultaneously. We've been looking at MTB transcriptomes, where we've carried out post-pathogen total RNA sequencing, where we're looking at post RNome and pathogen RNome, in a simultaneous way. So we've looked at a project. We've conducted a project that was based on methylated RNA that was immunoprecipitate. We also do ultra low input RNA sequencing, single cell RNA sequencing, viral RNA sequencing, and metatranscriptomic studies is a very interesting area for us now, where we are interested in looking at environmental sources such as sewage, water, fomite, and face mask sources. So, speaking of which, I would like to shift my gear to the current crisis that we are facing. So this decade has been a decade of viral pandemics. We've seen a lot of pandemics since 2009 to the present day, where we see COVID-19 as a very disturbing disease that is caused a lot of suffering. So RNA viruses are important class of viruses that are emerging as very highly infectious agents and are a big cause of concern. So there are more than 180 species of RNA viruses that are currently identified, out of which 90% are of zoonotic origins. So surveillance of which needs to be scaled up so as to pin down novel viruses. Characterization of these viruses can be enabled using RNA-seq as a tool, which is the need of the hour now. This is also important to delineate the pathogen pyramid, which you can see in the bottom part of the slide, and to understand the transmissibility of the virus. So the pathogen pyramid is designed in such a way to describe us the level of transmissibility of the pathogen across various species, across various hosts. So the level 1 entails exposure of humans to the pathogen. Level 2, it can progress to level 2, where the pathogen can infect humans. It can also directly pass to level 3, where it has the ability for human-to-human transmission. In some cases, like COVID-19, it has the ability to progress to level 4 directly to cause an epidemic after causing human-to-human transmission. So viral RNA sequencing is a very important tool for sequencing such pathogenic viruses. So it has varied applications in SARS-CoV-2 basic research, development of public health guidelines pertaining to the disease, and informing intervention strategies to combat the situation. So the first step for which is sequencing the genome of the virus of SARS-CoV-2, which will enable us to understand the architecture of genomic RNA. It has also enabled us to identify RNA modifications and RNA joining events and mutations and sequence diversity of the virus. RNA sequencing will also help us to track, evolution and phylogeny of the virus, of the novel coronavirus, which will facilitate our understanding and our ability to determine its rate of divergence, predictability of the rate of divergence, modeling transmission between species and between humans, and delineating the pathogen pyramid as I described. Metatranscriptomic sequencing is a part of RNA sequencing tool, which allows you to sequence environmental samples from which you can sequence organisms that are not culture amenable. So you can look at samples such as sewage water to estimate the viral load and to estimate the amount of co-pathogens existing. This will also help us in turn to determine community transmission and predict cluster outbreak. The other environmental sources could be ranging from fomites to masks worn by infected persons, to estimate a localized outbreak such as in offices or organizations. And RNA sequencing will obviously help us in design of antiviral treatment and vaccine research. And a very important and intriguing part of virus research is studying immune gene expression repertoire in the host in response to the invading or infectious pathogen. So the first study using RNA sequencing as a tool was published in Cell in early part of 2020, where the authors sort of decode the entire genome of the SARS-CoV-2 virus using long-read nanopore technology. They assembled a full-length genomic RNA spanning across 29 kb, and which was primarily found to be responsible as the mRNA, the coding mRNA. There were 9 subgenomic RNAs that were also discovered. So, so again, SARS-CoV-2 RNA sequencing now enables us to study viral evolution and predict its transmissibility. So the changes in the pathogen pyramid level, which is mediated by viral evolution, can be studied in greater detail now, as we know the genome. Phylogenetic analysis of the genome sequence data will aid in determining probability of human-to-human transmission and predict the dynamics of this pyramid. So, for example, a temporal time dependent sequencing of MERS-CoV-2 was done, which suggested zoonotic events triggering only limited human-to-human transmission, which you can see in panel B. Although H1N1 and panel C experienced widespread transmission between humans. So SARS-CoV-2 RNA sequencing will also help us understand, our strategies to develop vaccine and improvise vaccine development by allowing us to identify primary targets and tracking the expression of key genes that are involved in vaccine deployment. Determine the mutation rates of the virus to inform likelihood of vaccine efficacy in longevity. Now, RNA vaccine is a revolutionary vaccine that has been much talked about, which shows promising advantages for ease of production, administration, and safety over DNA vaccine inactivated virus, etc. Moderna is a company which has shown to the world its first mRNA vaccine candidate, which they call mRNA-1273 against SARS-CoV-2, which went through the phase 1 trials also. Our efforts, Genotypic Technologies' efforts in the fight against SARS-CoV-2 include whole genome sequencing on short read and long read technology platforms of the virus. We undertake viral shotgun transcriptomic sequencing projects also. We're also very, very interested in undertaking metatranscriptomic sequencing from environmental samples, where we could sort of sequence co-pathogens. There's increased interest in the area of post-response to the infection, where we would like to look at targeted, target regions of the host genome in response to the infection. For keeping in touch with us or reaching out to us, you could follow us on LinkedIn. You could follow us on Facebook and Twitter. We have on LinkedIn the world's largest genomic professional group with over 50,000 members, and we're growing. We share NGS analysis tools and methods, lab protocols, and job vacancies. And we have groups with more than 100,000 members. You could reach out to us for any customized service related queries on genomics@genotypic.co.in and the WhatsApp number, which is displayed at the end of the slide and bottom of the slide.